Well, hello everyone and welcome back to my videos. Hey, I'm Abigail, I do wedding cakes and I'm from London. Now you are going to be a little bit of a fly on the wall for one of my videos where I'm setting up a wedding cake today. I get questions so often about how I set up my wedding cakes, and I thought it would be so much easier for me to talk through. Now this is not like a easy walkthrough because there's people in the background which I'm gonna have to blur out, so just a little heads up, because I wanted to respect the privacy of my wedding guest that I'm going to be doing a wedding for. So I am going to break down the process. Now you would have just seen I travel with a trolley. Now this trolley is a game changer. I will try my best to link everything I use down below. This trolley has saved my back so many times. It really helps me to just come in really quickly, especially when you may have venues that may not necessarily have trolleys at the venue. I feel like venues that aren't hotels very rarely have trolleys. Now you would see here that I come stacked already. So this is a 3-tier cake. It's actually not the normal size. My couple wanted a chubbier wedding cake that I used to do. So normally my sizes are 11 inches, 8 inches and 5 inches if I'm doing a large cake. But then alternatively, I normally liked, I just didn't realize how much of a Daisy Parker I was. I think I had just seen the bride, so I just was like doing a quick scan of like the whole outfit, all the hair, all the makeup, and she looked stunning. She looked absolutely beautiful. But I didn't realize how much of a nosy Parker I was. Okay, so back to it. Now if I'm doing a tall and slim cake, as you would see here, I like to do an 8-inch, 6-inch and then a 4-inch. So I do like to I personally prefer a tall and slim cake, but I'd love to know in the comments, which one do you prefer? Do you prefer a slimmer cake or do you prefer a more wider, chubbier cake? So I thought this moment was super precious because I saw my bride for the first time, and it was very sweet because I hadn't seen them in the day at all. I'd literally just come in whilst they were doing their ceremony, not the ceremony, the cocktail hour. Now I come in with a little bit of ganache in a little tub, and then I have backup ganache just in case. Now I put down a tea towel just to kind of minimize any like droppings of the ganache on the tablecloth, which is a little bit of a nightmare to clean out. Now I'm coming with the top tier, and you would see I've just thrown down a little bit of non-slip mat. I have so many little bits of non-slip mat, and it's just so helpful to stop the cake kind of going all around. Now you would see normally I have gloves, but this time I've got like a little bit of parchment paper. I find it so funny because people normally point in the when I'm setting up a cake, because I think it's like real life TV for them, which is quite funny. But anyway, so I have a camping bin as well, so I'm just putting all of like my rubbish and waste into that bin. Now you'll see I'm stepping back just to double check that it's even. Now sometimes I'm doing dowels. I dowel the cake at home. I should have a video on that, but if I don't, I will make it. But I dowel at home, and sometimes I'm doweling to the cake. Now there's times when the cake's a little bit higher in different parts, so I just want to make sure that it's even. So sometimes it's not, so I always travel with dowels, so I want to put in another dowel just in case to make sure it's even more even. Now the boxes I use are box secure boxes. Again, I will link them down below, and I have a discount code to get 10% off if you use the code Abigail10. Now I come with a little tub, and also come with a piping bag full of ganache. This is super helpful because I'm able to just go in and fill in the seams. This makes for a really flawless cake. If you don't know by now, I use ganache, and I also want to make sure that it's really crisp. I just love a crisp coloured. Now this cake was a little bit interesting because I literally got like 3 tiny clusters of flowers. So I did have to run into the the reception space, and take some flowers from the reception just because it was going to look super sparse. If I didn't mention already, this is a 10-inch, 8-inch and a 5-inch. I prefer this type of like setup for the cake, especially if it's wider. Now if I'm setting up a 3-tier cake, as I said before, I come in with 2 of the tiers already stacked, and then I top the wedding cake with the top tier when I get to the venue. If it's 4 tiers, again I do 2 tiers, and then I do this 2 single tiers at the wedding venue. I used to back in the day, especially if I was having a 5-tier cake, do 2, 2 and then 1. I hope that makes sense. So the bottom 2, the middle 2, and then top of the top tier of the cake. I have not done that this wedding season actually. I feel like it's really stressful stacking 2 tiers on top of 2 tiers. I think the weight of everything, it's just way more likely for it to go wrong or for it to crack, especially because I don't use drums. I use boards on the middle and top tiers, so the weight of it is just not as stable. I haven't had any mistakes or anything happen when I'm stacking the cakes, thankfully, but I also just want to make sure that it's completely safe and completely sturdy and stable. So if it's a 5-tier cake, I'm doing 2 at the base and then stacking the top tiers when I get to the venue. I know a lot of cake makers prefer not to stack when you get to the venue. They prefer to do everything at home, but for me, for example, I actually don't have a huge car, so I want to make sure that the cake is going to fit in the car, but also I've just been so used to setting up in front of everyone, and no matter how many people are there, no matter if there's like one person or 50 people, there will always be stairs. And even if you're setting up at home, I personally just prefer to drive with it unstacked because I find that less intimidating than having people stare at me. I hope that makes sense, but I know everyone does things differently. Now, things that have really saved my behind whilst I'm setting up is extra ganache, especially if you scuff your cake, or extra buttercream, or a smoother if you're using fondant. It has just been a game changer, especially when I am just working around the cake and just working around scuffs on the cake. You can see the cake is pretty like sharp because I'm using ganache. If I was using buttercream, it would not be as sharp. I've just, over the time of using ganache, I think this is my 3rd year that I'm using ganache exclusively, and I'm not looking back. Before that, I used to use buttercream. Before that, I used to use like a vegetable shortening, and then before that, I used a fondant. I was working with fondant, but I'm just not as strong with using fondant as I am with ganache. Now, I've set up the cake, everything is already stacked, everything is already done, and what I want to do is I want to make sure that I am going in with the flowers. Now, I don't really have an idea. I said this to one of my friends, like, I don't really have an idea when I set up, and she's like, because you've done this so many times. Now, I know that if I'm doing a 3-tier cake, I want to have 2 clusters. I personally don't like having a cluster of flowers on the top of the cake, like a posy. I just prefer to have them on the sides. I just don't like the look of it having a bit too top heavy, especially when the diameter of the top tier is a little bit smaller. Now, I'm wrapping each and every stem with florist tape that is also food safe. I use Hamilsworth over here in the UK, but you want to make sure that the florist tape is food safe. And I am just going in really slowly at this part. Again, there's been times when I have put in all the flowers and then one arrangement just looks a little bit off, so I just take everything out and then go back. Now, here is a little bit of a review of what my couple said, and they loved the cake. This was a very just nice and simple cake to contribute to a very simple, beautiful wedding. They went for white chocolate and raspberry, chocolate and salted caramel, and lemon and elderflower as their wedding cake flavours, which I thought was a really nice, like, end of summer wedding cake, and you've got still some freshness, but you also still got some like comfort flavours from the chocolate and salted caramel at the beginning of autumn. Now, this part probably takes me around 15 minutes to perfect if it's a 3-tier cake, but if it's a really big cake, I do give myself a good amount of time because I want to make sure that I am making the arrangements look perfect for the wedding cake. Now, game changer things that I have with setting up my wedding cake is I actually have a meat leveler. I will put a little photo of it up on the screen now. And this is really helpful for when I am trying to lift up each and every tier from the ganache plate. I ganache on ganache plates, and I think it's just really helpful to kind of get the tier off the cake sometimes when it can be a little bit awkward to get off. Now, I should say, my bottom 2 tiers have a central dowel all the way through the cake. This is just, it's not really to help it like be What do people use a central dowel for? Well, for me, I personally just like a central dowel because it's not going to move. I don't fasten it or glue it to the board. I literally just poke it through. I've done so many videos, as you would see, of me central doweling the cake, and I just poke it through and then put the top tier on top, and it's just really, really helpful for me to have stability. I have set up a wedding cake before, and I put my foot on the brakes, and this was a 5-tier cake, and in the middle tier I did not use a center dowel, and I literally just saw the cake like just go to the side, and I'm like, wait, what's happening? I'm not doing that again. So if I'm ever stacking, I'm always doing a center dowel. I would love to know if you have any questions on how I set up. I try and make my setups as least as stressful as possible. I have a killer emergency kit. I have really, really good sturdy boxes, and I also give myself enough time. Whenever I'm communicating with my clients, I always say I need around 60 to 90 minutes to set up your wedding cake. I very, very rarely take all of that time, but just in case something may happen, there may be traffic on the way, a cake may slip out of the box, who knows? But you want to make sure that you have way more time to rectify any of the mistakes. Now, I've had my fair share of cake nightmares. I'd be lying if I say I've been in business for over 5 years and I've never had a cake disaster. That would just be impossible. But you want to make sure that you have a good emergency kit that's making the setup all the more smooth. So I'd love to know, do you have any tips that you have when you set up your wedding cakes, or set up cakes in general, or not even just cakes? I even think florists or decorators. I know planners have amazing emergency kits. But I hope that was helpful. Oh, you got to see a little bit of her dress, but I hope that was helpful, me breaking down my setup process. If you have any questions, please leave them down below, as I would love to answer them. But I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the day, whether it's morning, evening, or the afternoon. And here is the cake all done and all set up with better lighting now. There we go. They had a really lovely colourful wedding colour theme, which I thought went really well for the time of year. See you on the next one.